Thanks for coming down today to meet us at Valley Relics. This is Ming Lai, and he is working on the Mooneyes documentary. So let's start off with a little of your background. So you have your own production company called Humanist Films. And tell us a little bit how that came to be and how you ended up, what's your goal with Humanist Films and how you ended up working on this project.
I started Humanist Films in 2008. Just like any filmmaker, you just want to, express your own vision, put your name on it, and hopefully do some good work. And so it was just a really humble goal, just to try to, start my own little company, right? So most recently, we've been working on a lot of feature documentaries. My previous documentary to my current one's called Craft of Speed. We've been calling it the Mooneyes documentary because everyone knows Mooneyes, but the previous one is called Visions of Warriors. So it's about veterans who are suffering from mental illness and using photography therapy, a type of art therapy, to treat it. And so we worked on that prior to working on Craft of Speed. But even earlier than that, we did a documentary called Art Recession. It's about the importance of art education. And so we're kind of within the sphere of social issues, but with this new documentary, it's kind of more arts and culture, if you can call it that. It's about hot rodding, but it's about culture building, really.
So that brings me to a question that maybe you can answer for me, because I grew up here in Southern California, and I was aware of and had been to the Mooneyes store in Santa Fe Springs, been to some Christmas parties there, which were always a lot of fun. So the name of the company is Moon Equipment, correct?
Correct.
So, but everyone calls it Mooneyes. So, and obviously I'm assuming it's because the logo and the name and that, morphed together into Mooneyes. Is the company still Moon Equipment?
The company was founded by Dean Moon, legendary hot rodder, of course, and he called it Moon Equipment Company, right? But in 1992, when Shige Suganuma and Chico Kodama bought the company, they eventually turned it into Mooneyes. So there's alternate, names, also Moon Equipped. And so you'll see all the stickers of the different variations, right? But today we know it generally, and everyone loves it as Mooneyes. But the original name was Moon Equipment Company.
The actual name of the business moving forward is Mooneyes.
Correct.
Right, and you'll see the old vintage boxes that say Moon Equip Co.
So when Shige Suganuma, started his dealership in Japan in Yokohama, Dean Moon blessed it and said that you can name it Moon of Japan. And so, there's variants of that name, but, again, maybe the umbrella name is Mooneyes.
Why don't we go over the history of Dean Moon and how Moon Equip came to be?
You're asking me a really difficult question because it spans the history of hot rodding, right? And so we're talking about one of the founding fathers, one of the guys who was there at the beginning. And so, he came to California with his dad, and, they settled in Santa Fe Springs, California. This was a really talented kid who was mechanically inclined, loved hot rodding. He was taking, auto shop classes. And, back then I think it was pretty advanced. You're learning how to build engines and things like that. And so he developed the fuel block, one of his very first products. And so he was doing that out of high school, right? And so starting to sell it out of his car to racers. And he was a hot rodder himself. And so he was racing, he was building, he was creating these innovative parts. So he was a parts innovator. And then eventually started his own company, and that was, Moon Equipment Company, and based in Santa Fe Springs, California. And so he was there at the beginning, right at the heyday of hot rodding. And so we have some amazing people that we interviewed in the film, historians of museums, editors of leading publications, and they all said that the heyday of hot rodding was really after World War II, right? Returning service people came, they were all mechanically inclined. They were all, that was kind of the time when cars were becoming more and more prevalent, right? This amazing cars, amazing car design. And so these returning servicemen would, with their skills, hop up cars, make them go faster, right? And then, they were racing, they were building, they were customizing. And so it was an amazing time that he grew up in. And so then that was really the beginning of, I'll just call it Mooneyes, the beginning of that era of hot rodding and Mooneyes' rise.
Moon Equip initially was founded or started like a brick and mortar, the place in Santa Fe Springs in 1957 or thereabouts?
Yeah, it was in the 1950s. I don't have the exact date, but yeah, it was started during that time.
And it's still in the same place in Santa Fe Springs as where it started. I mean, I know there was time before that when he was selling it out of his cars and at the tracks and things like that, but that brick and mortar, it's still the same.
It's a very special place because it's one of the few, if not the only, company that's still in the original location, original buildings, using the original equipment, and so it's still there and producing the same exact parts. And so that's quite amazing. A lot of companies will grow, they'll outsource their production, they'll just grow bigger, right? And so now, it's not uncommon for them to source their production out, and they're using CNC machines, they're making hundreds if not thousands of their parts. The special thing about Mooneyes is really they're making them by hand. They're at that same shop with the same time-honored techniques that they've been doing all along. And so, as you mentioned earlier, Dean Moon was into drag racing, but he was also into land speed racing. But because he was within that racing world, he began to reach into all the different genres of racing, right? So when you go to a typical Mooneyes car show, you'll see a large variety of cars, right? From all different genres. You'll see guys drag racing on the strip, but you'll see lowriders, just parked nearby, right? You'll see old guys, you'll see young guys, and so all the guys that are into these different scenes, they're all together in one place. And that's one of the most special things about Mooneyes shows, as well as Mooneyes itself, is that somehow they've managed to unify, bond all these guys who love cars together.
Car guys in general can be tribal at times. We'll call it that way. I'm a Ford guy. I'm a Chevy guy. We don't mix. But you're the same guy. And I never thought about it that Moon has been one of the only things that they can all agree that that's cool. Yeah. Whether you're a Chevy guy, whether you're a lowrider, whether you're a hot rod guy, whether it doesn't matter, that everyone kind of comes together around that brand. And am I correct in thinking that Dean drew that logo?
So the history of the Moon logo, I actually knew about the logo before I knew about Dean Moon and the company, right? If you're just aware of all these great brands that come, a lot of times you don't really know how they came to be, right? They're just there, right? But the Dean Moon had an interesting last name. So Moon is a fantastic last name. From the stories from Dean Moon Jr., his son, he was saying that during high school typing class, he would backspace and put dots in the O's. And so you had, a Moon last name with two dotted I's, right? And then if you look at the very initial race cars, they had a very simplistic logo. It was just, two O's and two dots, and it didn't really have that great of a more expressionistic eyes, right? But Dean Moon, based in Santa Fe Springs, California, not too far away from Disney, worked with a Disney artist. So a Disney artist to create the more elongated eyes and the expressive pupils within them, and then now there's that iconic logo, right? But I think logos are logos. They don't really mean anything until you give them power, right? And they've gained power over time because of what Dean Moon has been able to accomplish, but more so because of how much people love and have adopted, I guess, what's behind that logo, right? And that really is the spirit of hot rodding,
Yep.
the spirit of racing, the spirit of car culture, right? And so if it wasn't a great company with great parts that stood behind their parts and was highly involved in racing and development of cars and connections to, to a lot of car culture, that logo wouldn't mean anything. It would just be two eyes.
Right.
But it's beloved because of all these things that have been accomplished.
And it's also attached itself to a period in time.
Yes.
Even though it is a living, breathing entity now, it's definitely attached itself to a period in time, which I always felt was 60s and 70s Southern California, which I'm a little biased by it, but I think in the 60s and 70s Southern California was the coolest place on earth.
Yes.
And so you look at that logo, and we're putting a lot of emphasis and baggage on it now in retrospect, but it looks so cool and it embodies that era. And I think part of the allure to it is simple. And as a filmmaker, I'm sure you would agree that simple is hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you nail it, it stands the test of time, and it, the most iconic logos, if you go through them, are the simple ones that convey a feeling or a time, or and they do it very simply. And I think that's part of the beauty in Mooneyes now, that they haven't deviated into like, well, what if we try going over here and we try going over there and we mess with the logo? It's like, no, it's kind of the keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
And I think that helped it, keep flourishing to today in 2022. And I would imagine it's a bigger company today than it's ever been, and growing.
I think Mooneyes has just a very rich design history. I think because it came up during that idyllic time in the 60s, right? First of all, you have the great Mooneyes logo, right? But everything from typography to other logos that they've created, to Dean Moon's own aesthetic as a photographer, to all the people that he worked with. He was friends with Ed Roth, Wildman Ishii, who is part of their company, designed all the posters. He's a pinstriper. He essentially helped popularize pinstriping in Japan. And so because of all these people, because of the great, how should I say, this environment that they're in, they have this great history of art, design. It's connected to lowbrow art, which is fantastic, right? And we're sitting at the Valley Relics Museum, right? This is a fantastic place. You're seeing all these amazing, iconic logos.
Right.
Some don't stand the test of time, really, right? But others, they really have this. We love these old logos because they remind us of the past, but they also inform the future, right? And so, Mooneyes has been able to do that.
Right. And we love it because it embraces something from the past, but it's not dated. It doesn't look dated, but it has a feel of history. And personally, I think my favorite design era is the 60s, and especially out here in Southern California. So Shige opened the Moon Japan in Yokohama with Dean's blessing. What year was that, and what was his, if was his initial goal with that shop?
The start of Mooneyes Japan, Moon of Japan, has an amazing story. We talk about going to Mooneyes in Santa Fe Springs, California, right? They're very gracious. They're very hospitable when you go there. They give you shop tours. They'll say, look around. Everyone's taking photos of the dragster. They're going into the machine shop. Shige, as a young man on his honeymoon, did the exact same thing. He came to California for the very first time, and then went to buy a set of Moon discs. Dean Moon himself was there, showed him around, took him on a shop tour, and was just a very gracious host, right? And deeply impressed this young person, right? That this guy was just so kind to him, so nice to him, showed him around, and eventually sold him these Moon discs, right? And so I don't think at that time Shige really knew who he was. Dean Moon was a legend already, but he just thought of him as this great, nice person, right? Later on, when he was starting to research more, he says, "Oh my God, this guy is like a legend, right?" And he was just so kind and humble, and being able to show him around this fantastic place. And so eventually, Shige decides, I want to sell Moon discs in Japan, right? So he set up shop in Japan, in Yokohama, which is kind of like it's a port city, kind of like Long Beach or San Diego, and it has a huge international presence there. And so he got the blessing of Dean to call it Moon of Japan. So that happens. They establish it in the most unlikeliest of places. There's these kind of fashion districts called Motomachi. And he has a store in kind of a fashion area instead of like, an auto parts area, right, or industrial area selling speed parts. He was in, a fashion district, right? And he was on the second floor, which made, traffic a little bit difficult to get to. You actually had to look for this place, right? And so he did that for about 5 years, but then Dean Moon eventually would pass. And so that's when, because he loved this man, because he cared about, Mooneyes, he wanted to continue his business. And as, Chico Kodama is the president of Mooneyes USA, he was saying he didn't really think it was really about business. It was really about preserving the legacy of this man that he cared about. And so it made such an impression on him that, from this short meeting to eventually wanting to start a store, to eventually building a brand in Japan, to eventually wanting to take care of this guy's legacy, right? It's huge leaps. But I'd like to say the whole thing was built on love, really. Love for hot rodding, love for everything that Dean Moon stood for, about racing and hot rodding and land speed racing, and the interconnection between all the different racing is built on love, and passion for the sport.
And I think part of that respect is, Shige obviously has a lot of respect for the man, for the brand, and that's why he doesn't mess with it. Because it is a legacy in his mind, not an opportunity. Right. Which is, we can all be thankful to that.
A lot of times when they say, well, somebody buys a company, right, they will want to change it to their own image, right?
Right.
They'll say, oh, we'll keep, the history, but they won't really. They'll maybe do that for a time, and then everything will be changed, right? And that's very common, right? Everyone wants to make their own mark. But Shige and Chico respected Dean Moon so much, and the history so much, and the customers so much who wanted the same thing. They didn't change anything, right? It's still made by hand. It's still made to the same spec. It's, if a customer wants a custom part, then that's a little different. But, everything's, people who restore cars will go to Mooneyes because they can get the same exact part that was on a car from the 50s, right? Or the 60s. And so that's an amazing thing where you can get something that was made exactly the same, right? And so it's really about authenticity, heritage. They preserved all that. In Japan, it's a little different, where, while they still have all the Mooneyes parts, the challenge was in Japan that there was no history. People didn't really know too much about Dean Moon. So Shige helped to reacquaint people with Dean Moon's important history, right? And so he was a little bit more free in Japan to rebuild Mooneyes in Asia, as well as Europe, where he was reintroducing people to what Mooneyes is all about.
Right, so let's talk a minute for how your draw into hot rodding. I understand that it was your father-in-law who had a 32 Roadster, well, not a Roadster, but a 32 Ford.
I think the great thing about hot rodding and just, car culture is really it's something that's passed on. It's passed on from parents to their children, from fathers to sons, from fathers to daughters, and we see car families, right? Hot rodding families, right? So my father was taking me to car shows because he loved car shows. And so it was just this fun thing to be able to do with him as a father and son. And it's actually my father-in-law, right? So it's my wife's dad. And so it was just a great thing that he introduced me to, like, introducing me to hot rods. I didn't really know too much about them at that time. But I appreciated how they were built. I appreciated the people who made them. I loved anything. People would ask me, "Oh, what's your favorite car?" I love anything with a number on it. Really, anything that's racing inspired and racing purpose built for racing. And so I would always gravitate to those cars. And so, my father eventually bought this 32 Ford. It had a chromed engine. It was in bright yellow. It had red flames on it. It was an amazing car because if you drove down the street in it, everyone's looking. It's just a strange. I don't really like attention, but sitting in that car, it was attention grabbing. As you're rolling down the street. And so he won a lot of car show competitions, and it got a lot of acclaim for it. And so it was a cool car, but that car was equipped with a lot of Mooneyes parts. So that's when I began to learn about Mooneyes. And so later on, I had the opportunity to meet Chico at an event, and Chico was wearing his Hawaii shirt, and it was a Mooneyes Hawaii shirt. So I didn't really know, he didn't really say too much, and I didn't really ask him too much because I had just been introduced, but the person who introduced me said, this guy's into hot rodding. A total understatement, right? For the president of Mooneyes and the guy who helped preserve Dean Moon's legacy. So later on, I learned more about him. I learned more about Shige, and I thought, oh, this is an amazing story, right? And there's been a lot of writing about these two gentlemen, about what they've done, but and maybe some videos on the net, but not, a feature documentary about Dean Moon, as well as Shige Suganuma and Chico Kodama carrying on his rich tradition, right? His important legacy.
We have the original Moon in Santa Fe Springs. We have Moon in Japan in Yokohama. And there are some other locations in Europe, am I correct?
It's amazing, actually. There's dealerships all over the world right now. And so I think a lot of people think of Mooneyes, they think of Santa Fe Springs, California. They may know of the Japan location because of the big show in Yokohama, right?
Right.
But because of Shige and because of Chico, they've been able to extend or build the company into dealerships all over the world, right? And in places that you might not expect, in places all over Southeast Asia, in Bangkok, and in Singapore. So it's amazing how many places that you would be able to see a Mooneyes dealership that you wouldn't typically associate. You think of Southern California because that's where the birth of hot rodding is, but as hot rodding has grown, it's been adopted all over Asia, it's been adopted in Europe, it's down in Australia, which has a huge hot rodding scene, right? So it's really cool to be able to see an international family of Mooneyes dealers, right? And they are helping to continue this great tradition of hot rodding.
So when did you sit down with Shige and Chico and say, I want to make this movie?
So I had been kind of courting Chico, because he's based here in Los Angeles. Shige is based in Yokohama, and he comes a lot. But I said, "Oh, would you like to do some photography sometime, or do work on a project together?" And he says, "Oh no, I'm good." And so that kind of just shut it down because their own team is amazing. They have a lot of great photographers that they work with, a lot of great filmmakers. Again, like I said, they have a great design and art department, right? And so they had their own guys, and they didn't need me, an outsider. But I think I brought something to the table that was totally different, that, I am a filmmaker. I'm looking at it a little bit more from an objective point of view, from the point of view of of culture, car culture, hot rod history, pop culture in general, from these different angles. But the thing that really spurred me to tell Chico, you need to make a documentary now, was he started building a brand new land speed race car. He had already built a land speed race car many years ago, had been racing it for 10 years, and then he wanted to pursue another record. So he purpose built another race car, this time a rear engine modified roadster. His earlier one was a front engine modified roadster. And so as he started to build it, I said, we need to start shooting now. And so then I said, yeah, we need to document the build of this amazing car. We need to talk about the history of Dean Moon. We need to talk about your preservation of his legacy. And we need to talk about international car culture, that you helped to build. And so all these things are built into the film, but I thought, the documenting the build of a car, I think was the thing that helped start it.
Right, it was the lure that got him on the line, and then you could just walk them into these other elements of it. I would imagine, and maybe you can talk about this, that there was some hesitance on Shige and Chico to step in front of the brand and in front, could be perceived in front of Dean. And so was there some hesitance on their behalf?
I think so. I think both Shige as well as Chico, they're both very humble people. And Chico especially, he's very quiet, right? I mean, he's the president of Mooneyes USA. Everybody knows who he is. He has a lot of connections with the industry. He's won a lot of industry accolades. He has a land speed record himself that has since been taken away, so that's why he's pursuing another one. So he's in the history books, right? And so despite the fact that Chico has a lot of accolades, as well as Shige, in the industry and beyond, they're just very, very humble people, especially Chico. He's just very quiet, right? So it took some convincing of them to agree to do the documentary. But I think they're really doing it not necessarily for themselves, but to really continue their mission of preserving Dean Moon's legacy. That's, I think, their ultimate goal. It's not really about themselves, it's really about Dean Moon, which they've worked so hard to continue his legacy. And so I think that that goal, that mission to do that was what ultimately allowed to allow me to work on this project.
Where are you with the film now?
I started shooting in October 2019, and so that was a little different time in history. History's been going by fast.
It's a whole nother documentary.
Yeah. I literally was in the machine shop at Mooneyes looking at the rails of the car on the floor and Chico welding them. And so it was just an amazing thing to be able to see the car go from pieces of metal into this amazing vehicle that he built. And then, I had been shooting from October 2019 all the way up until the beginning of the pandemic. And so the pandemic hit, not only Mooneyes shut down, but the rest of the world, right? Japan shut down, and there was just a lot of uncertainty in the air. A lot of legacy companies, a lot of historic companies have actually closed because of the pandemic, and so we were not sure even if Mooneyes would survive,
right.
If this legendary company. But something amazing happened during the pandemic in that everyone had to stay home, everyone had to essentially self-quarantine, everyone needed to kind of protect others, right? But everyone got to working on their cars in their garages, right? Everyone was just, for that period of time where everyone was spending time with their families, spending time with themselves, a lot of guys were working on their cars. And so they couldn't go to the car shows where Mooneyes is normally in order to buy their parts, right? So a lot of these guys just went online and bought their parts, and so the online business of Mooneyes actually increased during that time. And then when the pandemic eased and people were able to go back out into the public and car shows started happening again, and they started holding, exhibiting at the shows again, selling at the shows again, then that's when business kind of continued business as usual. But it was amazing that they were able to survive during this time because, so many companies didn't, and, so many people got sick and died, right? So,
Right.
We feel blessed because we're actually able to be here today because, we're healthy and we're safe and, we're able to do this. And so when the pandemic eased, about a little bit less than a year later, I was able to continue shooting.
Okay.
So I essentially caught up with Chico at that time where he had built a lot of the car, but Chico kept on, building it and also deconstructing his car, right? He had built an entire chassis and decided to change the design of it. So he threw that out and built it again. So he built it so that the rear was different, it hung differently, and it was actually much longer. And so I think as you build, you realize, there's certain things I want to change. And so because Chico kept on doing this, building and unbuilding, I would literally see the car almost built, and then the whole thing was back into pieces, right? I was under the strange assumption that as you build, it would just continue to finish, right? It was never like that. It was in various states of building and unbuilding. And so I went and continued documenting his build. The goal was to try to build it in order to race it over at Bonneville. So I was able to follow him and his team for the entire season of Bonneville through the different sanctioning organizations, right? The SCTA BNI, the Utah Salt Flats Racing Association, and back to SCT BNI for World Finals. And so following him during this entire racing season was just an amazing experience. And then we filmed all the way up until maybe the beginning of NHRA this year. And so finally I had to say, that's it, I gotta stop, because Mooneyes does a lot of cool stuff and they're continuing to do cool stuff. I think Chico is getting ready to race at El Mirage, and so I can keep on filming and it would be a 10-year documentary, right? But we wanted to kind of keep it within this kind of fixed time and place, right? And so we finally had to say stop, and now we're on to editing. So we're in post-production now.
Great. So yeah, because it's an ongoing story, you have to find your exit.
Yes.
Or you just go along with the story. You can just keep going and going and going.
It becomes a Netflix series, right? Just like Drive to F1 for Drive to Survive, right? We'll have multiple seasons of Mooneyes.
So you're in post now. Do you have a tentative release date? And what is the plan once the film is finished? I mean, I'm assuming through this conversation that your goal for the film is also preserving, its root, preserving Dean Moon's legacy and how it's traveled over these decades and it's touched people's lives, whether they were customers or other racers or Shige and Chico and now Chico and now yourself.
Right now we're in the thick of editing. We're looking at in editing, we have what's called a timeline. And the timeline is basically all your footage that's placed on a linear chronological timeline, right, within the editing program. We were initially looking at 24 hours of interview footage that we had interviewed, Chico and Shige and Dean Moon Jr. and all these other experts in the field. But, now it's down to, as of yesterday, down to about 11 hours. And so we're making progress, but it's really like sculpting, where you're bringing this sculpture to life, chipping away at things, or even like a sushi chef, right, cutting out the best parts to reveal the best parts of the fish. And so we are planning for late 2022, early 2023 to try to finish the film. We're trying to coincide with some amazing celebrations that Mooneyes is having. 30 years of Mooneyes here in the United States, 35 years of Mooneyes in Japan. But if you actually think about it, when Dean Moon started, it was in the 50s, so we're looking at an even longer time span. But this is really when Shige and Chico started, right? So 30 to 35 plus years of history, right, that they're celebrating under their leadership, right? But the goal of the film is really, just like what Shige and Chico have been doing, their mission is really to honor the legacy of Dean Moon. It's to celebrate Shige and Chico's work in preserving that and building that company, turning it into a global brand. It's to celebrate hot rod history. It's to celebrate car culture. And ultimately, it's to inspire a new generation of hot rodders. Like I said, my father-in-law introduced me to this. And he showed me this shiny vehicle that I said, wow, that is cool, right? Took me to car shows and showed me the work of other amazing builders and racers, and started going to races and getting into cars myself. I don't know if I can necessarily say that I'm a car guy, because I want to reserve that to guys like my father-in-law who restore, who build, and these other amazing guys like Chico who are building and racing and building parts. I think of those guys as the car guys, right?
Right.
But I want to honor those guys with our film, and hopefully inspire younger guys like myself and even younger, to look into the sport, see how cool it is, get it onto their own, and bring their own to this grand tradition, right? And that's what Shige and Chico have done. They've introduced American hot rodding to the rest of the world. The rest of the world has made it their own in Australia, in Asia, in Southeast Asia, in Europe. And so it's a passing of the baton, right? It's the carrying on of a great tradition, and that only makes this auto sport, this history, this pastime even greater.
So it's my understanding that you are still in fundraising mode to finish the film and get you through post-production.
So we're independent filmmakers, right? We don't work for Mooneyes. We're not. We're told, and this film wasn't commissioned by Mooneyes. It's really something that we were interested in doing ourselves, right? So we started the film without any funding. We just thought, oh man, we need to start documenting the Chico's building of his new race car, and so then we actually started before we even had any money. And so then we've been actively raising money through a crowdfunding campaign, which actually is about to end on April 30th, but we have a long-running, just regular fundraising campaign. Our fiscal sponsor is the International Documentary Association, so they're the fiscal sponsor of our film. So if you were to donate to our film project, it's actually through them, who is a nonprofit 501c3, I believe. And so you can donate to help us finish the film, because we're already finished with the production, the shooting of the film. We're actually in the post-production process, which means that we'll be doing editing, color grading, and then doing audio post-production. So a lot of the funds that we're trying to raise money for is for audio post-production. We're working with an amazing team. Sven Falconer is one of our audio post-production guys. He's the composer. He's worked on he's one of the composers on Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, the Harry Potter franchise. He's worked on a lot of franchise films, so he's this extremely talented composer. Our sound designer is Jeff Hutchins. He's won 5 Emmys. He created the soundscape for SpongeBob.
Nice.
And so we're really honored to be able to work with him. And then our sound mixer, who's going to bring everything together and mix it together, is Bruce Greenspan. And his most recent project was the Night Stalker series on Netflix. And so we have an amazing audio post-production team. It's actually even almost bigger than our shooting team, because it was just me and my co-producer Tuan Tran, who also was my co-director of photography. So it's a very, very small team working on it, but the cost to produce a film, the cost to post-produce a film are very, very high, especially as an indie filmmaker. So we've been running fundraising campaigns since the beginning, and so we've had a lot of great donors and supporters of our film who've already donated. So if we can get more donors, then it will help us to ease our audio post-production and post-production in general. And with every goal that we can reach, we want to use it to help distribution, to try to get it out to car guys, car people, the people who we made this film for, really.
Well, I think it would appeal to people in general that are, like we talked about at the beginning, that are interested in design and culture, and because it does, in the 60s in Southern California, and I think it has a broad appeal. So I think you will nail the car guys, no problem. But I think you'll also be pleasantly surprised with the non-car people that are just interested in either the era or the design and things of that nature.
Yeah, I love how you brought that up. I mean, Mooneyes is so widespread in its appeal, right? That it touches a lot of different parts, from pure car guys, car people that love cars, racing, to pop culture. Dean Moon was involved in a lot of car commercials, working with Budweiser and other famous brands, right? So it was in the public consciousness at that time. And then they're so involved in fashion and collaborations with other brands. And so it's extended into action sports. It extends, they collaborate with Vans and other brands like that, right? Into that action sports, how should I say, lifestyle, right? So lifestyle branding. And so it reaches a lot of different areas, and it's united by Mooneyes, and it's international and global, right? And so Shige has introduced it in Japan, where some people who wear Mooneyes don't necessarily have a car, right? In Japan, you don't have a lot of hot rods. They have motorcycles, right? And so it's a whole different scene out there. But again, it's people who love cars and car culture, and that it's an international brand. Same thing in Australia. They have their own style of hot rodding and own racing out, and their own salt flats out there. And so a whole different scene, but it's completely united by their love for cars and Mooneyes.
Right, and there's a rebelliousness to all of that I think transfers even into music, because there's a place in Mooneyes, whether people know what it is. We're back to that logo. Yeah. People love that logo, and it just embraces something that's kind of rebellious and something so simple, which I think is amazing to be able to do that. Because I have a friend who he's Scottish, and he's a touring tech, and he's worked for the Foo Fighters. He's worked for Velvet Revolver and all that. And when I first met him, we were working on something together, and I came in, I was wearing a Mooneyes shirt. And he said, "What is that?" And I said, "It's Mooneyes." And he's like, because I've seen it around the world on people, but he never knew what it was. But he always wanted one. He didn't know what it was, but he instantly knew it was cool and that he wanted one. And he said, "Do you know how?" And I said, "I'll get you one." And I have family in Orange County. So one time coming back, I stopped by the shop and I walked in. He's like, "I've been looking for one of these for years." And so that's what I mean. There is a large audience, because at its core, it's just cool. Bottom line, it's cool. Down to that logo is just like, you don't know why it's cool, but it's cool. And that's, the beauty of design.
Dave Shutton, who's a lead builder over at Galpin Autosports, he's a pretty famous guy. He's restored a lot of the 60s, 70s show cars, Pink Panther Mobile, and all of these amazing Ed Roth cars. He's probably one of the foremost experts in that area. He said something that was just really simple about Mooneyes, about the logo and about its appeal. If you know, you know.
Right.
And if you don't know, you'll find out.
Right.
Because you want to know.
Right. Exactly. 100%.
So, it's an amazing thing when someone has been able to create that, as in Dean Moon, and continue it as Shige and Chico have done. But, all these guys are getting older, right? Eventually, what's going to happen later, right? How do we preserve culture? How do we retain history? How do we perpetuate something that's cool, right? Because historic brands like that, legacy brands like that, brands that have power and meaning and are so cool and so widespread that unite so many different kinds of people, that unite diverse people. And when you go to the Mooneyes show in Yokohama, it's one of the best car shows in the world. One of the best things really is its international appeal. All different kinds of people are there hanging out, becoming friends through their mutual love of cars and car culture, right? And when you have an event like that, and this year's theme is very apropos to what's going on in the news and in current events, the theme is peace. And when you have an event where you can create this international gathering of people who are just getting to know each other, become long-term friends, it's an amazing thing. And if they can perpetuate peace and brotherhood and sisterhood, that's a cool thing.
Well, I wish you the best of luck in editing. You got a lot of work to do. And I can speak for all of us here at Automoto that we would love to be involved and love to help you wherever we can to promote it, to screen it, whatever you need. You have an open door with us, and we'd love to work with you and get the film out there to as many people as possible.
Thanks so much to you guys over at Automoto. It's great to have a film festival, an arts festival that's specific to automotive and motorcycle culture and its connection to the rest of the world. And so it's an honor and privilege to be here. So thank you so much.